be careful when you tell me to take as much time as I want. I may talk the whole meeting. I have an old mentor, he mentor for about 40 years, and he died. He was a month shy of 105, and he was working until he was over 100. And he'd always say to me, "Come on, Haggerty, it takes you a half an hour to say hello. Let's go." So I have to be careful with that. But my name is Dave, and I am a real alcoholic, and I always say that real alcoholic because it says that in the book. If you're many times, if you're a real alcoholic, and I have to keep saying that because I'll tell you, there are still times that I think to myself, was I a real alcoholic? How bad was it? Wasn't that bad? I never lost a job and all these things. It's like it's so easy to forget. And today I had something and I was thinking like, oh my God, I forgot all about this episode of, drunkenness, where I was so drunk. It was like I was sickening, and that's a good reminder to me of just how sick I was and how sick I can be if I don't continue doing this work. But I've been through this process with the help of our two big book step study sponsors, a loving God, in meetings just like this. And I've done most of my amends, but I still have a few left. And I do the best I can to practice these principles in all my affairs, steps 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. Sometimes I don't do it. Sometimes I talk myself into, well, it's more important to do this work today. I'll apologize in advance. I moved from Maine down to Massachusetts on Monday, so that was like a 17-hour day, getting the movers and getting everything loaded, and then driving through the city of Boston through rush hour. And the guys didn't get out of here till about 8 o'clock at night. And the last 2 days it's just unpacking boxes, and I'm selling my house that I had in Maine tomorrow, and there's been all kinds of paperwork screw ups today. So I'm all for gots, but you know what? I come to a meeting anyway, you come, someone asks you to speak at a meeting, my sponsor told me when we got through this, he said, anyone asks you to speak, the only time you can say no is if you're in a hospital. So if you're asked to speak, you got to do it. And he pointed out to me in the doctor's opinion where Bill asked for the privilege of sharing his experience with other people at the hospital, not the burden, not the work, the privilege of sharing his experience. And he said, it's a privilege to do this, and never forget that. And I try not to forget it. But yeah, I had just a brief thing. I drank for 35 years. The first time I really drank, when I was a kid, my father would give me a little jelly glass with a little bit of beer when he was having his lunch or something. He'd give me a little sip of the beer. So I don't count that as drinking. My first time drinking really was when I was 15. Of all things, my parents were selling the house that day, and it was the last day of school. I think it was June 13th, 1964. And I planned on having a big party with my friends because I wasn't going to be living in that neighborhood anymore. And I stole I grabbed, my father had a lot of whiskey in the attic. So I went up there probably 2 months before June and went into his chest, and I took a bottle of whiskey out, and I took it out of there and I put it somewhere else in the attic. I figured if he doesn't miss it in 2 months, it's going to be safe for me to take it. If he does miss it, I can help him find it and say, oh, it was over here, Dad. So he never missed it, and I took it. And of all things that I took, it was a quart of Old Granddad, 100 proof, not 80 proof Seagrams, 100 proof Old Granddad. And myself and my friends, we bought a quart of ginger ale at the drugstore and went back down to the field, and I lived in Dorchester. And that ginger ale was gone before, like 3 or 4 ounces of the whiskey was gone. And myself and another guy drank the rest of the whiskey. And I'm lucky I didn't die then that night from alcohol poisoning. And it's funny, it's like when they sell some houses, I had nowhere to go then because my parents had sold the house that day. And they had gone down to, they had a little summer place. They had gone down there, so I had no place to go, and I was still drunk at 11 o'clock at night. So I went back to my house and I looked around and I found a window that was open, and I climbed in, I propped the window open and I went in there and I passed out on the floor. And the new owner of the property came on Saturday morning and woke me up, and he had that look on his face like, oh my God, you are a real mess, kid. You know, you are really in trouble. 15 years old. And I should have had that. I should have taken that as a lesson. You know, I could have taken that like then that, but never did. I was an alcoholic right from day one, and I drank until I was drinking pretty heavy till I was 26. I was graduate. It's funny because it's 50 years ago now when I was graduating from law school, 1975, and it was right around then that my doctor called me and told me that I had significant damage in my liver. My counts were way up on my liver, and I had to do something about it. So I stopped for 6 months, stopped drinking, and then much like Jim, the used car salesman, I had the insane idea 6 months later. Well, if I mix Kahlua and vodka in cream and a little bit of milk together, that'll line my intestinal tract and I can drink again. That's the insanity. And I remember hearing like the Jim put whiskey into his milk, and I was like, ugh. And I thought, geez, I did almost the same. It wasn't whiskey, it was vodka and Kahlua. And then I continued to drink until 3 days shy of 50. And I was at my doctor a year or so ago, and I had some issues with the widowmaker artery. And so I was talking to the doctor, and she said, well, do you drink? And I said, no, I don't drink, but I drank a lot until I was 50. Yeah, I drank a real lot until I was 50, and I had some damage when I was in my 20s. So I imagine I had a lot of damage by the time I was, more damage by the time I was 50. And she pulled up my chart and looked at all my results and says, well, it's amazing. She says, you're the perfect counts now. You know, so God was good. You know, I stopped when I was 50, and I'm 76 now. And so God was good. You know, it's amazing the power of the body to recover if you just stop abusing it. But yeah, so now about sex. What the hell does I read that and I said, what the hell does sex have to do with alcoholism? And I found out everything, because I always thought alcohol was my problem, that my problem started with alcohol. But I had resentments, I had fears, and I had inappropriate sex conduct well before I was 15 years old and had my first drink. I drank because of these things. I drank because of my resentments. I drank because of my fear. I drank because I didn't think I was good enough. The alcohol was the magical elixir. When I had that drink, it was like, I'm Fred Astaire, I'm Zorro, I'm Rocky Marciano, I'm all these powerful things when I have a few drinks. And that's why I drank. Drink was my solution. Alcohol was the solution to my problem. So all those things were there. You know, it says somewhere in the book that the alcohol is a symptom of underlying causes, you know, something along those lines. But I look back all the time, like I think it was on page 62. 62, selfishness, self-centeredness. That we believe is the root of our troubles. Not alcohol. It doesn't say alcohol is the root of my troubles. The selfishness and self-centeredness. And later on, it gets into, well, how is that manifested? But it has here, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. My resentments, my sex conduct, how I related to women, how I treated them. And then when they would dump me, then I'd be wild. Like, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, I manipulated a lot. I was married young. I get married first time when I was 23 years old. And I stayed married for 22 years until I was married 22 years. And then my wife divorced me. And I was furious, like, she divorced me. I'm like, I give her everything she wants. She wants the house, I get the house. She wants a new car every couple of years, get a car. But you know what? I didn't get her what she really needed, like compliments and tell her how much I appreciated her and everything. It was like I was brought up, my mother and father were both Irish immigrants, and the Irish are kind of like measure me by what I do for you, not by what I say. And but you got to say things. You got to tell people how much you appreciate them. And I was actually, when I got divorced, I was really mad. I was mad, and I was mad for a long time because when I got divorced, I was still drinking for another, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, and I couldn't see the truth. I was like, everything I did, and I get divorced, and I'd see other people who I think they were worse than me, but but they may not have given material things, but they gave emotional support. So and that was my motto. Was like, well, I'm doing all these things for you. You should be happy, and but people need more than that, and I didn't realize that, and I learned that through the process of going through this work, and it was even after that when I was single for 6 years, I went out with 5 or 6 different women, and each time I'd be going out, I was just using them to make me feel good. I wasn't contributing anything. It was like, I'll do this and this and this. I'll take you out to eat. I'll take you to show. I'll take you to do all these things. But eventually, each one of those women would see that I wasn't really giving all of me. I don't know if it was afraid, like if I give a lot of compliments, maybe they'll really feel good about themselves and they'll dump me. God knows what reason, like I sometimes look at it, I think, I was just afraid. I was afraid to give of myself. That's what it was. I was afraid really to give all of me, because what if I give all of me to somebody and it doesn't work? If I don't give all of me and I hold back and that doesn't work, I can say, well, it's because I didn't really try. But I'd have these women when I was going out, when I was single, and like 2 women in a row, like, because I could put on a real good act when I was getting to know someone. And so 2 women in a row, like going out with them for a while, they said, oh my God, I tell all my friends how good you are, and you're too good to be true. And I thought, when they said that, I thought to myself, you have no goddamn idea how right you are. It's all an act here. It's all an act. And then when they would leave, they'd want to break up, because it was always them breaking up, because I'd hold on to someone until there was something new. But they'd sense that women are a lot more observant than men, and they'd sense that and dump me. But when they dump me, then before they dump me, I'd be thinking, I'd be wake up in the morning and think to myself, how the hell am I going to get out of this goddamn thing? I don't want to hurt them to it, but how am I going to get out of this gracefully? But when they break up with me, then I was desperate to have them back. And I think, this is crazy. This is insanity here. What is going on? What is going on in my head? And I talked to, it wasn't an AA guy. It was a spiritual guy that I was friendly with. And he got a thing, and he said, he grabbed like 3 salt shakers or whatever at the table. And I said, I can't understand this, like, I want to get rid of them. And then when they dump me, I want them back. And he grabbed these 3 salt shakers. He said, okay, I'll explain it to you, Dave. And he takes 1 salt shaker and says, this is you, Dave. And the second salt shaker, that's your girlfriend. And the third salt shaker is all your fears, doubts, and insecurities. when you have the girl there, you don't have to look at your fears, doubts, and insecurities. But when they leave, now it's just you and your fears, doubts, and insecurities. And that's why you want them back. You don't want them because you have a shared like giving of yourself and they're giving of themselves, and to have a good relationship. You're using them. I heard at a meeting one time that the guy said, and that applied to me, like, you use a woman like a bottle of beer, like she's a drink. It's something to distract you from your own insecurities, your own resentments, your fears, your doubts, insecurities. It's like, it's true. I look at God, and then finally I got like, I met the woman I'm married to now, and I was going out with her, and she's in the program. She's, as a matter of fact, she's got 38 years today. I think it's 38 years today. Yeah, April 14th, May 14th. So she's got 38 years. I have 26 years. It's easy for me to remember because it was 3 days short of 58 since I stopped drinking. So, how old am I? 76. So I got 26 years in a few months. And but I didn't really. I wasn't drinking. I don't even say I was sober for that period of time, because I had 7 years of going to regular meetings, and thank God for the regular meetings. They kept me away from the drink. The fellowship, they supported me. The fellowship supported me to keep me away from a drink, and I also, like, I drank for so long that I kind of knew that doesn't work, but I very easily could have gone back to it if I didn't have the fellowship. But the fellowship wasn't enough for me, and I didn't understand that. I thought, I'd often think to myself, if I go to these meetings, if I go to the meetings long enough, then I was brought up Irish Catholic, so I went to Catholic schools, and I went to church and everything. So I remember one time thinking, I think this is probably like, if I do these meetings long enough, it's almost like going to confession, you get an absolution, and then you say your prayers, and then you're good. So if I go to enough meetings, then that's my punishment. And after I do enough punishment of going to meetings, then I will get cured. But I had just no idea of the program that was necessary for me that I had to do the work. Like, I would think all the time, I don't have to do all this stuff. I mean, one morning I was taking a shower, and I had read something, and I said, in the shower, I don't have to do that. I'm not that bad. And like, my higher power, intuitive thought came, millions of people have done this and have been healed by doing this. And you think you don't have to do it? And I was at a meeting one time, and the guy was saying how he'd go 6 months. He was a professor at a college down in Boston. And he said, I'd always get 6 months. And after 6 months, I think, well, I must be not an alcoholic. I can have a drink tonight. And he said, I'd stop on the way home, and I'll get a king size 6-pack of Bud. I'll have 2 beers Friday night, 2 beers Saturday night, and 2 beers Sunday night. Then I'll go to work on Monday. And he said, invariably, I've had that 6-pack gone by 8 o'clock, and I was out buying a case and a couple of jugs of whiskey, and I wouldn't go to work for 3 weeks and wouldn't call or anything. And my mind, instead of identifying with that, I thought to myself, well, I'm not that bad. I never do that. I never miss work. I don't care. I could be up till 3 o'clock in the morning, deathly sick, and I'll still get up and go to work. But I went to work so I could preserve my right to drink. He didn't go to work so he could preserve his right to drink. But both he and I were doing things so we could continue to drink. And that was early on. It still took me a long time. Even when I get into big book step study, I would go to meetings, and I asked a guy to sponsor me, and And he didn't go to the meeting. He stopped going to the meeting. So every week I could go to the meeting, and I'd always say, I'm Dave and I'm writing. And I wasn't writing. I was thinking about writing, And as I was saying, this discussion beforehand, a woman came to our meeting one time on step 4, and she said, if you've been writing for over a year, which I had been writing for over a year, which I wasn't writing, but she said, if you've been writing for over a year, you're not really writing, you're just living in the house with a notebook, and don't lie to yourself. And that's what I was living in the house with a notebook. And I often say that at meetings for newcomers, because if they're anything like me, if they're there, they'll see the truth of that and really sit down and concentrate on writing. So it took me probably a couple of years to get through the writing and this stuff. But I just like that self-centeredness, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we believe is the root of our problems. That was certainly the root of my problem, selfishness and self-centeredness. And because of the selfishness and self-centeredness, that's why I drank, because that gave me relief. So I didn't feel like it gave me relief from all those things. But then you get in here on page 64, it talks about therefore we started on a personal inventory. That was step 4. A business which takes no inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-facing and fact-finding process. It is an effort to discover the truth of our stock and trade. One object is to get rid of damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of business be successful, he cannot fool himself about the value. So all the stuff that I was depending on to help me, it wasn't working. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. We searched out the flaws in our makeup, which had caused our failure. Being convinced that selfishness, self-centeredness, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations, which then goes into saying common manifestations, the most common, the biggest offender is the resentments, then the fears, and then the sex conduct. So I had all those things well before I ever had a first drink. And I had to, it's like, I remember like step 3, doing that, like made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand them. And in my sick mind, I thought, well, I've turned it over to God. Now I don't have to do anything. It's up to God. If I screw up now, it's God's fault. It's not my fault. I've turned everything over to God. But I learned by doing this process, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, as I understand. But then I have to follow that up. The decision is not like, it's up to you, God, to take care of it. The decision is that I'm going to do the rest of the work, which means step 4 through step 12. I have to, that's the decision, not that I just hand everything over. But the primary things are the resentments, the fears, and the sex conduct. And I say I was married 22 years my first time. And I was never running around like with women and doing stuff like that. I was pretty good like that, but I wasn't really a good husband. I wasn't a loving husband. I wasn't giving compliments and things like that. And when I was single, I was using women, and they weren't married to me, so they didn't have to put up with the shit, so they dumped me after 4 or 5 months of acting like that. And that helped me, because it finally looks like, geez, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe I'm doing these things, but still didn't pick it up, still couldn't figure it out, what was wrong, what was messing up my life. And I found that by doing this work and looking at myself and seeing how I set the wheels in motion, I set the wheels in motion for my first wife to divorce me. I set the wheels in motion, by not treating women right when I was single, for them to dump me. And And I had to learn how to do things differently. I had to learn how to be honest, how to be considerate, how to be considerate of other people's feelings, and help them out and not manipulate. My thing was, I'll manipulate. If I give you this, then you should do this for me. And it's only by going through this process. It's like it says the whole purpose of this book is to have us establish a relationship with a power greater than ourselves, which I identify as God. And when I found that when I did this work, I found that I did create a relationship with a power greater than myself, which is God. And when that relationship is good, all my other relationships are good. My marital relationship is good. My business relationship is good. All my family members, it's good, because I'm being honest and I try to do the right thing. I try to help people as much as I can, and I'm not looking out for myself all the time. Before I'd be like, I'll give you something, but first I'm going to get my share. I'm going to get what's good for me first, and if there's something left, I'll help you out. I'll give you something if it's going to give some good for me. Now I try to do things the way God would do it, and I found it's absolutely the truth. When my relationship with God is right, all my other relationships in life will be great. And thanks so much for letting me share tonight.